for being here today, all of you. And this is one of the bigger delegations we've had in a while, but thank you. As you probably know by now, the minister is coming for the last half of this meeting, so if it would be possible, I'm going to ask all of you to keep your presentations to, rather than the normal 10, to about 7, if possible. I think most of them are in hard copy that the members will get anyway, and it would just leave a little more time for questioning, so if you can accommodate that. So appreciate it. And I think we're going to start with, because there's a PowerPoint, we're going to start with National Steel Car, and Mr. Aziz, we'll turn it over to you, if that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Gregory Aziz, Chairman and CEO of National Steel Car from Hamilton, Ontario. On my left, I have Hugh Nicholson, Executive Vice President, Marketing, Sales and Quality, and to his left is Lorraine Johnson, our Chief Operating Officer, and to her left is Lee Scott, our Regional Vice President of Marketing and Sales. We are here today to present a dynamic solution through a new fleet of rail grain handling equipment which will go a great distance in solving the problems of the grain supply chain in Western Canada. If you'll look at the next slide. National Steel Car is headquartered in Hamilton, Ontario. It was founded in 1912. We are the world leader in rail freight design, engineering, and manufacture. We've invested over the last 12 years approximately $350 million in capital investment in robotics, automated manufacturing equipment, and techniques. We occupy a 75-acre site in Hamilton, Ontario, which is approximately 2 million square feet. We employ over 1,900 people and are the second largest private employer in Hamilton. We have the capacity to produce over 15,000 cars annually, and we manufacture all types of rail cars with the exception of tank car equipment. We are the only rail car builder in North America certified to the ISO 9001-2008.
As the Canadian farmers sell their grains into a competitive global market, one of the biggest impediments to their success is the inefficiency of the current grain car fleet. The most effective way to enhance Canada's grain farmers' competitive position is to replace the existing Canadian grain car fleet, as it is past its useful life, obsolete, and inefficient from a variety of standpoints. The design is outdated. It provides a lower carrying capacity. There's inefficiencies in the loading and unloading. The dimensional envelope is outdated. And as a result of the age of the cars, there's a high cost of maintenance, repairs, as a result of obsolete parts. This is our vision of a competitive solution for the Canadian agriculture industry. Some of the key benefits to the grain producers is a 23% increase in the capacity. There's greater efficiency and performance through the entire supply chain, and there's a lower carbon footprint for the sector. The statistics comparing the new fleet to the existing fleet. We refer to gross rail load, GRL. That's the maximum load which can be carried on rail, combining the empty weight of a rail car and the loading weight, or the payload. As you'll see with the new fleet of cars, there is a 9% GRL increase. The cars are 4,000 pounds lighter than the existing cars. As a result, there's 27,000 pounds more grain in every rail car. As a result of the increase in cubic capacity, there's a 15.5% increase. Due to the shorter length of car, there's also 9 additional cars for every train start. There's also a 20% increase in the siding capacity as a result of the shorter car. There's more efficient loading opportunities, and that's good news for farmers. As I mentioned earlier, there's 9 additional cars in every train, again resulting in a reduced carbon footprint. There's only 3 discharge gates on the current cars, or on the new cars, and that results in a 25% reduction in handling and reduced maintenance. The average life, or the average age of the current fleet is over 35 years of age. The new cars are designed for 50-year life. This results in a 25% increase in the design life and provides for a modern and efficient fleet. As a result of the additional capacity and the tonnage, there is over 2,800 tons more grain moved in every train start. That's a 21% increase. There's a 23% increase in the overall cubic foot capacity of the train, resulting in over 145,000 cubic feet. The railways are increasing train lengths all the time, so this improvement only provides additional opportunity for extra grain movement. Our summary of the economic assessment, assuming a 3-year program, results in direct jobs of 2,600. A conservative factor of 4 of induced jobs is 10,500. 285,000 tons of steel consumed by this program, and Canadian content will be 75%. The supply chain for this program reaches right across Canada, as outlined in this table. I won't review it all, but you'll note the province and the commodity that can be provided.
So in summary, replacing the current obsolete fleet will increase delivery efficiency by moving more grain in each car within each train start, will enhance the performance of the entire supply chain, will lower the carbon footprint for the sector. It will create over 15 million hours of direct employment across Canada, deliver innovation yielding enhanced competitiveness for all stakeholders, elevate the supply chain performance to compete in the 2020 global marketplace, and provide Canada with the most modern grain car fleet in the world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll take questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, and we'll move on to our other witnesses before questions. Now we'll go to the Canadian Bankers Association. We have Mr. Brown, Mr. Montel, Mr. Robo, and Mr. Renard. And who wants to start? 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Canadian Bankers Association, its 52 members and 267,000 employees, I would like to thank you very much for the invitation to speak to the committee on the subject of Growing Forward 2, with a particular emphasis on competitiveness. I am here with Peter Brown, Scotiabank, Bertrand Montel, National Bank, and David Renard, BMO Bank of Montreal. We are here to answer your specific questions, so I will keep my comments brief. I will, however, take a couple of minutes to highlight how we support farmers and rural communities, underpin competitiveness, and promote financial sustainability through our lending, our work on Growing Forward 1, notably Agri-Invest, and the importance of relationships. Banks have a stake in seeing farmers be competitive and succeed. Our bankers, operating in roughly 2,100 rural and small-town branches, live and work in the same communities, building and maintaining versatile and durable relationships with farmers. These bankers have made agriculture a priority. 17% of total funds lent to small and medium-sized enterprises by banks across the country is dedicated to the agricultural sector. That's almost $1.05. Our bankers also donate both their business resources and considerable personal time to support local agriculture, associations, clubs, and events. We know as much as anyone that a strong farming sector means a resilient rural community. Agriculture, more than any other sector of the economy, experiences wide swings in business conditions. In order to help our clients be successful, Banks work closely with farmers through those inevitable peaks and troughs, and our record demonstrates that we have done so. This past decade has seen farmers confront BSE, avian influenza, drought, floods, the H1N1 virus, and country of origin labeling, and we have worked with farmers to find solutions that are sustainable, take their individual situations into account, and that are in their best interests. Sometimes this requires difficult conversations with farmers. Ultimately, however, those conversations are meant to be in the best interest, to preserve the capital and net worth of the farming operation with the objective of ensuring its sustainability. The banking industry works hard in contributing to the long-term viability of the agricultural sector and the rural communities. For farmers who wish to increase their profitability and build their business, improving competitiveness often means adopting innovative technologies, implementing new business practices, and accessing new markets. Banks supply the tools, advice, capital support, and help farmers accomplish these objectives while providing them with the peace of mind to support their families. Recognizing that the family farm is still a vital part of agriculture, on the personal side, we help farmers save for their children's education and their own retirement through personal financial planning services to help them manage their investments. Banks provide specialized advice, lines of credit, loans and mortgages, and everyday banking needs such as deposit and savings accounts. Customers in rural Canada have access to the same services and prices as customers in Canada's largest cities. On the business side, banks provide operating and deposit accounts, insurance, investments, one-on-one interaction around the business plans, and financial advice, in addition to operating term and mortgage loans. Banks also work with producers on succession planning to ensure a viable transition to future generations of farmers. Indeed, the industry has developed customized products for succession and transfer of ownership. I'd like to take a moment to talk about how we underpin competitiveness and promote financial sustainability through our lending. Banks are an important source of capital for agricultural producers to allow them to expand and make their operations more productive. Operating and term loans, including CALA, and mortgages allow producers to buy farm inputs such as seed or feed, purchase machinery and equipment, install green power systems, and make land or building improvements. Lending decisions are based on an assessment of the borrower's ability to repay the loan, making decisions on an individual case-by-case basis, and based ideally on a well-thought-out business plan. These decisions are balanced with more macro conditions such as the prospects for the business sector the borrower operates in, economic prospects in general, the cost to the bank of raising funds, etc. Canadian banks have utilized the same prudent lending practices and excellent risk management systems in agricultural lending as they do in every other line of business. These practices and systems have led to a banking system that has been ranked 4 years in a row as the most sound in the world by World Economic Forum and ranked first in the world for financial strength by Moody's Investor Service for 2 years in a row. Experiences in other countries have shown that poor risk management is not just bad for lenders, it is bad for borrowers as well, and its negative effects extend into rural communities generally and even the broader economy. A banking system that demands of its clients a prudent degree of risk mitigation and management is competitiveness enhancing in and of itself. This discipline allows agricultural producers to be better positioned to deal with the difficulties in the industry and take advantage of the fact that maybe their competitors cannot. Indeed, over the long term, and consistent with our focus on prudent and responsible lending, bank credit has expanded in line with the agricultural sector's growth. Between 2001 and 2010, the provision of bank credit has been consistent with and appropriate for growth of economic output and net operating income in the sector. This largely reflects the fact that about 2/3 of bank lending is for the purposes of working and operating lines of credit. Not only is this lending linked to the level of agricultural activity, it is also more complex than lending against assets, so it requires the bank to truly understand its customers and to work closely with them over time. Now, growing forward, the objective of Forward's business risk management programs is to provide protection for different types of losses, as well as to manage cash flow. They are designed to be simple, responsive, predictable, and bankable. As banks, we encourage our clients to participate in available government programs in order to manage market risk, that can lead to fluctuations in their farm income. This provides both the client and their lender with the additional level of comfort. As banking is so heavily relationship-based, working with our clients is essential to understand what is going on with their businesses. As I mentioned a moment ago, our lending decisions are based on an assessment of the borrower's ability to repay the loan. In order for a banker to make a proper assessment of a business, they weigh a number of factors, including the financial health of the producer, the prospects for the business sector in which the borrower operates, economic prospects in general, and growing forwards BRM programs in which the farmer is participating. Not only do banks consider growing forwards BRM programs in their credit assessments, banks directly administer Agri-Invest and assisted in developing and implementing the federal government's hog industry loan loss reserve program, HILRIP, to restructure APP loans for hog producers. The Agri-Invest program is a savings account for producers offered by banks to provide coverage for small income declines. Once an agricultural producer makes a deposit to an Agri-Invest account at a bank, a matching government contribution will be credited to the producer's account. Banks invested a tremendous amount of time and resources to assist governments to meet their commitment of offering these savings accounts to producers. And while implementing these accounts was not without its difficulties, the government engaged the industry early in the process, and the lines of communication were open at all times.
Mr. Roble, could you just wrap up?
Yeah, I'm just going to. I've just got one sentence left.
Thank you.
We were able to build on the strong relationship cultivated with government officials during Agri-Invest to implement the HILRP relatively quickly, in about 3.5 months, to the benefit of producers. So thank you for the opportunity for the CBA to meet with you on your study. We would be pleased to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you very much. And now move to Farm Credit Corporation. Welcome, Mr. Stewart. Mr. Carlson, good to see you here again. 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, honourable members. It is a pleasure to appear before the Standing Committee on behalf of Farm Credit Canada today. My name is Greg Stewart, and I am the President and CEO of FCC. With me today is Lyndon Carlson, our Senior Vice President of Marketing. FCC is a commercial crown corporation, and we deliver financial and business services to the agriculture and agri-food industry. We provide 100,000 customers with financing, equity, management software, information and learning events tailored to the unique needs of agriculture. We focus on primary producers as well as suppliers and processors along the full value chain. We have provided more information about FCC in the handout in front of you. FCC supports the Government of Canada's Growing Forward 2 framework. We concur with the vision of agriculture as an industry led by highly skilled, risk-taking and forward-looking entrepreneurs who create value for our economy and the world. In a rapidly growing world, a safe and reliable food supply is absolutely critical. Canada will increasingly move to the front of the class from an agriculture standpoint. By the year 2020, we'll be one of only a handful of nations capable of producing enough food to sustain its own citizens, and at the same time, we will help feed almost 200 other countries. So how can we further enable competitive enterprises and sectors in Canada? So I've grouped my ideas into 3 themes. Farms are getting bigger, and big isn't bad. Agriculture management is sophisticated, and innovation and productivity are critical. So the first point regarding farms getting bigger. Agriculture now involves players of all sizes, from small farms to substantial commercial enterprises. It provides 1 in 8 jobs and employs 2.2 million people. And agriculture and agri-food is, in fact, Canada's largest employer. The industry is a huge part of Canada's GDP and affects the performance of our entire economy, and it's big, complex, and, of course, increasingly diverse. There's a perception in some quarters that the family farm is disappearing and that commercial operations are not really farms anymore. For sure, the size of farms continues to increase, as it has for generations. However, almost all of agricultural operations are still run as family farms, despite their size. Our mindset needs to shift away from the view that our industry is a tiny boat on a rocky sea, needing protection from rough economic waves. Instead, we need to view it as a major multi-billion-dollar engine that it actually is, and help agriculture to capitalize on domestic and international opportunities. When inevitable cyclical and other challenges happen, policy and other instruments need to be designed to help all producers weather those storms. As with any other industry, we need to understand that bigger enterprises have very different needs from smaller ones. Adopting a new mindset regarding the need for both large and small operation needs to happen within the industry itself, with policymakers and the entire value chain. We waste valuable energy when we think we have to satisfy the naysayers or those who are stuck on the old way of doing things. An increasing number of successful farmers and agribusiness operators have already adopted this mindset. They do not fret about whether they're too big or too small. They appreciate that there are many different ways to succeed. What they all have in common is a thirst for learning and adopting leading-edge business practices. They need the government and Canadians from all walks of life to view farmers as the sophisticated business people that they are. Second point is management sophistication. Today's production advances and technology alone would have been viewed as science fiction less than a generation ago. Big or small, all farms and agribusinesses must master a demanding and complex mix of management capabilities. In essence, producers are just like any CEO of their own business. In the past, farms were often run with 1 or 2 hired hands. They now involve a team and outside specialists and require deep knowledge not only of production methods, but also marketing, finance, HR, and IT. Producers need information to acquire and develop skills in these areas. That's how they can leverage their position in the agri-food supply chain, both domestically and internationally. Our agriculture community recognizes the need to learn and innovate. For example, more than 14,000 producers attended our FCC learning forums last year. We have over 33,000 subscribers to our weekly FCC Express, which according to our research is the most widely read agriculture electronic newsletter in Canada. And we have more than 75,000 subscribers to our Agri-Success magazine that brings successful farm management stories to life. And that's just what FCC offers. We recognize that relevant, accurate, and timely ag information can be found in many places today. According to the latest 5-year data available from Statistics Canada, university enrollment in agricultural programs has increased 16% in the last 5 years, with enrollment by women jumping by 19%. You can see Canadian agriculture is a diverse, complex industry that is attracting some of the best and brightest of both sexes. Successful farmers understand that knowledge is key to staying on top of sophisticated management practices. And on my third point regarding innovation and productivity, Canadian consumers enjoy some of the least expensive, highest quality, and safest food in the world. And that's directly due to innovation and productivity gains in the ag-food supply chain. Broad globalization pressures, a more affluent and larger population in emerging countries, and shifting food preferences at home are generating new opportunities for Canadian agribusinesses. A growing world population needs safe and reliable food sources. Export market opportunities will continue to increase, and at the same time, the emergence of low-cost suppliers in emerging markets is bringing new challenges to the Canadian industry. Innovation and productivity will remain key drivers of prosperity for the agri-food industry well into the future. And a highly innovative marketplace will continue to yield positive returns for Canadian agribusinesses and households. Agricultural research shows that high rates of return and continued funding should benefit farmers across Canada. For example, Canadian crop scientists developed canola, which has become one of Canada's leading cash crops. Tomorrow's discoveries will be just as vital. It's as straightforward as remembering that 2 varieties of the same crop can produce dramatically different yields and profits. Feeding the world means making sure that Canadian farmers can reap the benefits of the best agriculture science. Innovation and productivity are vital to the future success of this industry. We recognize the outstanding work of groups like Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, the National Research Council, and the Crop Development Centre, and encourage the government to continue their support. These are just some good ideas to reach what I believe is a very realistic goal, and that is to have the best agricultural economy in the world, and this will add jobs and new opportunities to many Canadians. In closing, agriculture is an incredibly diverse industry. Many sectors are doing very well, as you know, while some are facing challenges. I thank our colleagues in industry and government for their collaboration in addressing some of these challenges. For example, with AAFC and other leaders, we worked with hog customers through a difficult period to provide some strategic support through the Hog Industry Loan Loss Reserve Program, or HILRIP. And I firmly believe that these efforts help preserve some of the key current and future businesses in this industry. FCC is only involved in agriculture, so we are there for our customers through all cycles. That's the philosophy in our customer support program, and FCC recognizes the role that we play in helping our customers through difficult economic, weather, and industry circumstances that are not of their making. These efforts are not handouts. They are hand-ups. which respect the hard work and initiatives that are the cornerstones of Canadian farming operations. Generally speaking, Canadian financial institutions have done a good job of ensuring that credit is available to Canadian producers and agribusiness operators. All financial institutions have been able to provide affordable credit due to the lower interest rate environment that producers have benefited from with these lower rates. But it remains true for us, as for our competitors, that business is ultimately won and lost on the strength of customer relationships and customer service. To obtain the vision of agriculture outlined in Growing Forward 2, we need to create a mindset in sync with our desire to have a competitive and successful industry. We need to flip the proportion of time we talk about opportunity rather than challenge. And when I say we, I mean all of us, farmers themselves, financial institutions, the media, and the general public. Farming is a demanding business. However, the outlook is brighter than ever before. FCC's Vision Panel takes the views of some 9,000 Canadian producers and agribusiness operators, and more than 3/4 of those surveys say that their farm or business will be better off in 5 years. Thank you. Farmers, especially the next generation, need to feel proud about this industry. They need guidance counselors who say you are smart and you should pursue a career in agriculture. They need access to capital with acceptable repayment terms and competitive rates that really kickstart their ability to start their own operation. And let's not forget affordability. Although the perception may be that the cost of food has risen dramatically, the reality is that the overall cost of food, as expressed as a portion of the household's overall budget, has significantly decreased from a generation ago. So putting it all together, it tells a compelling story about our industry and its people. And so I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I look forward to any questions.
Okay, thanks to all of you for your presentations. Before we just like to remind our members and our witnesses that the 5-minute rounds, and that includes the questions and the answers. I'm going to be not quite as lenient today because we're restricted to an hour, so I would just ask you to try and respect that as much as possible. Mr. Allen, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, folks, for being here. Let me start with the National Steel Car folks, if I could, since you're closest to home for me. Obviously, coming from Welland, some of our folks clearly work up at your operation in Hamilton. It's a wonderful plan. Obviously, it meets a need. It thinks forward. Gives a new piece, as you've outlined, reduces the carbon footprint, becomes a more efficient car, handles more grain. Wonderful thing. Got any orders yet?
Actually, yes, we're exporting this car to the United States right now.
So you get orders from the U.S.?
Yes.
You get any orders from up here, from CN or CP?
Not currently.
Not currently. You get any suggestions for this? I mean, the first thing that came into my mind is a suggestion for there's a cash for clunkers program when it comes to automobiles. Maybe we need a cash for clunkers program for grain handling equipment. We get rid of some of those producer cars that are out there.
Well, there's no doubt that's a prescient observation. I mean, this rail system that currently exists will be broken within the next 3 to 5 years, and speed to market is vitally important to all of the stakeholders. And my colleague from Farm Credit has just gone through a very detailed dissertation on how the system works on the farm. We all know about that, but the fact of the matter is that once this grain is produced, it's the best grain in the world. We know that as well. It needs to be sent somewhere. It needs to be sent to market. And this system will break in the very, very short term, the current system.
Are you optimistic in this country that you're going to see orders that you can actually fulfill, rather than seeing an order book fill up from the U.S. and then Canadian operators turning to you and saying, okay, we need them now as well, and you saying to them, you're going to have to wait?
No, we wouldn't do that. What needs to happen here is for a very detailed investigation of what we're proposing. This is a tremendous opportunity for Canada. It's a tremendous opportunity for the whole supply chain from the farm right to the port of export, or if it's being moved domestically in North America, so that this product gets to market with great dispatch. Because speed to market is very, very important, not just to the farmers, but to the handlers, and we need to introduce this efficiency. And this is an opportunity to essentially leapfrog Canada's competitors in world markets.
And I couldn't agree more, by the way. And oddly enough, in the presentation, you outlined actually where the components are sourced.
Yes, sir.
And it reminds one of a Buy American program, but it's not actually about excluding folks. It's simply saying we do good work in this country and you can source it here. And that's what you're doing presently. So you're not actually giving an advantage to anybody through a legislative program. You're just simply looking at the competitive market and saying, you know what, we can buy brake lines that come from Manitoba or Ontario. We can buy steel from here, and it's actually all sourced in this country. What an amazing way to actually create jobs. I know my friends across the way want to do that. And so it seems incumbent upon us to find a way to make the rail operators in this country understand it's in their best interest to start making those purchases now, it would seem to me. And we're going to have to find a way to encourage them to do that. But if I could, because as the Chair said, we got 5 minutes, but I got about a minute and a half probably left, Mr. Chair.
About a minute.
Okay. Thought I could sneak an extra 30 seconds as the Scotsman on the team here. But let me talk to the FCC folks really quickly. I've talked to your folks before in our region who clearly are trying to help and support farmers, as you've said, through this cycle of all ups and downs, because there is a multitude of different cycles. If you could outline sort of 2 or 3 things that you see right across this country, really, that you would think are the really top pieces for you in engaging farmers when it comes to finance. So the difficulties, if you will, the pieces that you and they are really struggling with.
I'm having a hard time thinking about the things that we're really struggling with producers right now. The overall sentiment, honestly, throughout most of the country, is that the future of agriculture looks really bright. The livestock industry as well. We're seeing right now cattle producers looking to expand. Certainly, the grain sector is looking very well, and even coming through the latest turmoil, hogs are looking better than they have in the last couple of years for sure. So we're not, I'm not trying to dodge at all. We're not really facing significant struggles with our customers. They're telling us that, we're meeting their needs, and in today's environment, they're able to grow their businesses, and they are doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
We're out of time, Mr. Allen. I'll move to Mr. Storseth for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank everybody for presenting to committee today. I'd like, Mr. Aziz, Mr. Nicholson, thank you for your presentation. I'd like to start with National Steel Car, if I could. I thought your presentation was very strong. For the last few months, or last month, we've been dealing with competitive issues in agriculture, looking at new innovation. One of the things that consistently comes up from Western Canadians, whether it's in the shipping sector, whether they're producers, manufacturers, or distributors, is always enhancements to the rail sector. It's something that consistently is brought up. The level of service review is certainly something that gets brought up fairly consistently, is something that we need to do. But when we get talking about the innovation and the research side of the rail sector, they often are at a bit of a loss for things that we can do, solid programs we could put forward to help out and enhance our rail sector, the delivery from point A to point B, help unclogging the ports is one of the problems that we have with grain in particular. So could I just ask you in particular, I guess first of all, you're a Canadian-owned company. You employ roughly 1,800 employees, you said?
Yes, sir.
And the amount 75% of your product is made from Canadian product?
Yes, sir.
And of that, this is a great story that I hadn't heard until I had met with you before. I had never heard of this. So I'd like to give you a chance to talk about your company a little bit, talk about where you are selling your product to successfully right now, and where you see your company's ability to solve some of the rail problem that we have in our country.
Well, as I mentioned in my preamble, we are the leading rail car design, engineering, and manufacturing firm in the world. A lot of the work that we do is patented. We have over 250 patents issued to National Steel Car on our rail innovation. We have 50 patents pending at any one time. We've put an awful lot of thought into this renewal program for the Canadian grain fleet, and what we've yielded and what we've shown in this presentation is a tremendous advantage to this new equipment versus the existing equipment. To go to one of the points you made, how does it unclog the ports? If you envision this equipment as a giant conveyor belt bringing grain to the ports, and you have 200 cars moving through an elevator at any one time and discharging its cargo, each one of those cars is much smaller, has a much smaller capacity. This all takes time. This grain all needs to be elevated so that it can be then put on a ship to be exported. And the amount of time that takes, you only have a finite amount of time in 24 hours to discharge that grain. And if every one of these cars is inefficient and smaller, as we showed in our presentation, the amount of grain that's elevated is much smaller than could be done with this newer equipment, which is a higher capacity. You're discharging far more grain on a per-hour basis and elevating it, which allows you to load ships faster. It gets rid of ship demurrage in the ports, turns ships around quicker. This is a tremendous advantage, speed to market, for the grower, for all the members of the supply chain. The prairie elevators, it allows the railroads to move much higher tonnages to the ports with each train move, and the resulting lower carbon footprint. I mean, you're moving 5 existing trains in 4 under this system. So if you can envision 5 train starts of say 200 cars, you're moving that 5 train starts with 4 trains in this new equipment. That's where the lower carbon footprint comes from, that's where the higher efficiency comes from, and that's where the higher discharge rates at the ports or at the destination occur. That's how it all works.
It certainly sounds very innovative, and like I said, 23% more capacity with less carbon footprint. It sounds great. My last question to you would be, do you have any ideas on how we should replace the old fleet, 10 at a time, the whole fleet at a time? Do you have any suggestions there? And also lease or own?
Well, that's something that needs to be discussed and explored, perhaps at a later date. Our purpose in coming here today is to tell this committee and that we have the capability to solve this problem, and that there is a finite amount of time for this problem to get solved. We have the solution. It's a made-in-Canada solution, and we're prepared to embark on this and put the full efforts and resources of our company behind it and work with the entire supply chain, the policymakers, and everyone involved to get this job done, because it needs to be addressed in the very near future.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsett. I'll move to Mr. Valeriot for 5 minutes.
Thank you all for coming up and your vital contributions to the agriculture industry. You wouldn't be here if you didn't expect some tougher questions, so take no offense to some if you consider that. My questions first are to Farm Credit, and these are questions that have been really a result of my conversations with people that come to my office and speak to me. And I've been hearing from credit unions and other financial institutions in the private sector concerns about the rapid growth of your market share, 28% since 1993, and well, if we keep going up to maybe 50% in the next 10 to 15 years. An advantage that you have, of course, is lower cost of funds, limited regulatory oversight, no requirement to pay federal or provincial taxes, and I'm just wondering how you respond to that, because there are other people who are trying, obviously, to get a piece of the action, who are at an unfair advantage, or disadvantage, actually. And my other question is your mandate. It hasn't been reviewed since the year, since 99, 2000, and we're wondering if it's time for a review of your mandate. Would you be supportive of commencing a parliamentary mandate? Okay. And my next question is this. Sorry, you spoke of innovation. We all know the lack of venture capital. I can't tell you how often I've talked to FCC in supporting innovation at local levels. I'll speak for Guelph at the local innovation center. And, you know, as many meetings as are set up, and I'm not criticizing, but as many meetings as are set up, I'm not seeing a meaningful contribution into innovation and commercialization. So all our wonderful ideas aren't heading south all the time. So I'm wondering if you could make some commitments to that extent. But before you do, I want to ask a question of the banking industry so that I can get all my questions out. It's this. Debt, as of the 31st of December 2010, farm debt is $66.4 billion, up 6.1% over the previous period. And I expect that there's going to be some problems if our interest rates head south, in fact, go up. And that could happen. It's very real. People are borrowing 100% of the value of their quota, for instance. I'm going to ask of you how you plan to deal with the problem, and how do we insulate ourselves now for that eventuality. So let's go with Greg first.
Okay. Thank you very much for the questions. Plural. Maybe I'll just take your last question quickly first in terms of the venture capital side. So to date at FCC, we have invested over $100 million into venture capital, which has also attracted an additional $150 million to venture capital from other organizations. And we have just recently authorized another $50 million to be invested in the industry. So we are committed to trying to do what you had said there. Going back to the first question on competitiveness, we take that question very seriously. And so we have not changed our funding or our pricing practices to our frontline staff since we were mandated to borrow from the federal government. We track our pricing very strongly, and in fact, we can say that we know that when it's reported, 88% of the time we are the same or higher than our competitors' price. We do not intentionally win customers on price. They tell us, and we have lots of evidence to show that they are willing to pay more to deal with FCC because of our commitment to the industry, because of the knowledge of our staff, because of our products, etc. We, in fact, we also track the competitiveness, and so, or how much time that we face competition on deals. And so on deals under $1 million, our field staff only report competition 20%, less than 20% of the time, actually. And so there is not this big rush of people looking for this kind of business, apparently, other than us. Now, certainly many of those individuals who deal with us already would just come back and deal with us again. But if there was significant interest, somebody would be banging on their door to try and attract that business. They are not telling us that that's true. When you get to loans over $1 million, then the competitive rate goes up to 48%. So there is certainly interest in big loans, or more interest, but it's still less than half the time. And maybe finally on the mandate side, I would just say that we, as an organization are not, sorry, I'll back up one more time, and our growth is not a result of FCC pushing its products and services on others. We are growing because our customers are pulling us to serve them and help them grow their businesses and their enterprises so that they can achieve their visions and dreams and expand their operations and create jobs in Canada. And so that's why that's happening.
Okay, briefly, 30 seconds.
On that issue, I'd like my colleague from the National Bank to answer.
Bonjour. Pour ce qui est de...
With respect to debt, this is something that is of concern to us. We're following it closely. In making a decision about credit, the first criterion is the ability to pay back the debt. And then with the low interest rates right now, credit decisions are made by simulating an interest rate which is the set rate over 5 years. So in fact, it's actually a higher rate than the variable rate that exists now.
Mr. Lemieux.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question to the Canadian Bankers Association about the Hog Industry Loan Loss Reserve Program, HILRIP for short. Just to explain to my colleagues how this program works. It was established to help the pork industry dealing with immediate short-term cash flow pressure by converting short-term loans into long-term loans. So basically 10 to 15-year loans. And it was established in 2009. And I think all loans have to be repaid by 2025. So we're still in the early stages of the program. When a farmer took a loan from a financial institution, for example a bank, the bank would place a portion of that loan into a reserve account, and the government said that they would backstop the loan, and I think in the first 3 years it was up to 90%. From 3 years to 6 years, it was 80%, and from 6 years out to the remainder of the loan, it was 70% if there were a default on that loan. And so I've heard concerns, particularly in Manitoba. There's a concern that I've heard that because the loss coverage is declining, particularly in the 3-year mark, which is going to be coming up. The 3-year mark is coming up in the next 9 months or so. There's a concern that banks might call in some of these loans, and because they're better protected by the government's backstop of that loan. And the question I want to ask is, can you comment on this, and can you share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm happy to comment. Thank you for your question. First of all, I think that the Department of Agriculture should certainly be commended for assembling a program that certainly I think they did in an expeditious fashion. They did so in with significant consultation with industry and certainly with all lenders, those represented at this table today, and certainly a host more. So it was a really genuine collaborative effort that that they did, and they did it in relatively short order. The minister asked us to assist with the program in the summertime, and by mid-fall we had a program that was launched and was subsequently available to producers to utilize. As many of you, I suspect, probably know, the hog sector up until that point.
Sorry. I've got 2 other questions I want to ask. So could you just comment on this worry that Manitoba farmers have that some banking institutions may call in their loans early because the government backstop is higher in the early years of the program, especially when it's meant to be a 10 to 15-year program?
Absolutely.
Can you comment on that specifically? And I want to ask 2 other questions. I've only got 2 minutes left.
So the program, as your deduction is quite accurate in the way the program is structured. Certainly my organization, and I suspect everybody at this table, has worked far too hard to earn a sterling reputation really in Canadian agriculture. It's certainly the most significant subsector that we serve as an organization. We've worked far too hard to earn that reputation. We've experienced portfolio growth for at least a decade that I've been around, and there's no way that we would look to circumvent a government program to eke out an extra 10 points on any one customer's guarantee.
Thank you. If that were to happen, what recourse would a farmer have if he felt that in fact had happened to him? What could a farmer do in that case?
Farmers should be perpetually in consultation with their respective lenders on this issue, and barring if they foresee that they're not meeting the necessary receptivity at that level, then there certainly is a conduit for them to talk with people within the Department of Agriculture, and that's what I would encourage those folks to do.
Is there anything in the banking, like as the Bankers Association, is there any recourse not through agriculture but through the Banking Association?
Well, I know all of our organizations have ombudsmen, and there's also an ombudsman representative of the industry. Yeah. So those 2 may be ideal conduits for them to pursue any material issues that they foresee.
Okay. And my last question, very quickly, is: do you have a role to play in any of that? If this were to happen to more than one farmer, and you detected that, does the Bankers Association have a role to play in that?
Speaking for my organization, I'm the National Manager of Agriculture. So I would certainly like to be apprised of those developments if any of them were to present themselves, and would encourage anybody at this table to contact me and share any findings or even rumblings of anything like this transpiring.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemieux. Now I'll move to Ms. Reynaud for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman. My question is for the Bankers Association. How do you intend to promote the agricultural succession in this sector in view of the fact that there is a great need for large numbers of investments in the agricultural sector? It is very costly.
Certainly one that we're interested in. I can say that all of the Canadian banks certainly have activity and interest in this area. I can speak specifically with Scotiabank's involvement. About 6 or 7 years ago, we brought a program forward called Scotia Farm Legacy Services to address this very issue of transition from one generation to the next. The purpose behind that was to take a look at the whole situation of the farm client, not just one silo, investments, or the soft issues, or the accounting issues, but the whole picture of the farm client and bring in the specialists that farm client has. When it comes to the next generation and financing them, that's part of our program as well, and we certainly want the business to continue. We have to look at how we can do that. We have some financing programs in place to involve the retiring generation in a vendor take-back approach. I'm sure that the other banks have other mechanisms that they bring to bear. But what we do not want to do is we do not want to straddle that next generation with so much debt that there is no ability to withstand any bump in the economy, any bump in their situation. So we have to walk that very fine line of finding a solution that is long-term in nature, that probably involves the retiring generation, but continues that operation, and we're very serious and very interested in that.
Yes, the generation that would be retiring at that point would be able to live reasonably, but not live in poverty. If you sell your farm, say, to your child, the child would be indebted but would ensure the succession. So the parent who sells the farm to the child will have to have the means to live out the rest of his life. He doesn't want to sell his farm too expensively to his child.
And that's the whole purpose with working with the client and looking at their whole situation, in that you can see and you can work out a plan with them where you can see what the needs are for the retiring generation. And that's always our first going-in position, to see how we can get that retiring generation to have a satisfactory retirement for them. The first question that we always get, though, from the retiring generation is, can this business continue for the next generation? And we need to answer that. So we do both sides of it. And it's very, very important that we work with the customer's accountant and lawyer to make sure that we've got all of those issues covered off. I think it's the holistic approach in understanding the whole situation is really the key here to helping that next generation.
Merci. Thank you.
Now.
I still have some time? Okay. To Farm Credit Canada, there was an announcement of loans from Farm Credit Canada that involved a reimbursement of capital during a difficult period, that they don't want farmers to get too much into debt. Now, what happens if they have to pay that back because they will be more indebted and be in difficulty?
Well, I would say that we do, one of our key products is our key efforts is to support our customers through all types of situations as we go through the cycles. Such so that a lot of our mortgage loans do provide the facility for the customer to take a principal payment holiday for up to 1 year. And that money will all be repaid in full by that customer. We've just let them to put the pause button on a principal payment on a challenging year so that they can regroup
and make sure that that farm and that business is financially viable and on an ongoing basis, versus the alternative of falling into arrears and finding themselves behind and also finding themselves in a difficult time to recover. So we don't have a program such that there's a reimbursement of principal. We do have a program that allows the customer to press the pause button on a principal payment during a difficult year.
Okay.
And it's been very successful over a number of years.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll move to our last questioning here. Mr. Payne, and I understand you're splitting your time with Mr. Lobb?
Yes, I am. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair. Thank
Please.
the witnesses for coming. And my questions are really follow up on what Mr. Renault said in terms of young farmers. And I guess I have some curiosity in terms of, and it's both for the Canadian Bankers Association and Farm Credit. The young farmers who decide they want to go into farming. Say I am 20 years old and I've gone through ag school and I want to get into it, but my folks don't have a farm. What are you doing for those young people who want to get into it? Are you able to help them out on a financial basis? And then secondly, what do you do for farms, organic farms, which are definitely totally different in terms of the nature of general farming?
Sure.
Both. Yeah.
I'll happily go first. So in terms of for young farmers, I mean, as you know, farming is a capital-intensive business, and like any other big business like that, whether it's a car dealership or whatever that is, typically your parents are in it if you go in it. We have a couple of loan products. One is the transition loan that helps for the intergenerational transfer, but we also have specifically a first step loan, which is for young producers starting out, and we try to give them, an advantage to start out, and we're actually working on expanding that loan going forward. We just in terms of young farmers interested, we did over $1.6 billion of our lending last year, over 25% to young farmers. So there's lots of young people interested in agriculture, and we think that's a great thing. And we also are out there educating, talking to universities, trying to get people involved in the industry, I would say.
Yeah, I'm happy to continue with that. One thing that's actually been quite innovative in the last little while is a new program that a lot of the commodity boards have issued. And one that we just participated in earlier this week was a poultry producer who is a new entrant. They're mostly called new entrant programs, and the new entrants come into the program on a sort of a rented quota program where the quota actually is allocated to them for a temporary amount of time, and through that period they are then afforded the opportunity to achieve the necessary economies of scale to be successful in those respective industries. And we've worked extensively with many of those new commodity boards to see those programs come through to fruition.
Okay, I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Okay, my question's for Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stewart, if I walked into a FCC facility and wanted to buy a farm for the first time, okay, so that's one scenario. Or farmer X old walked in and he's been a farmer and had a relationship with you for say 2 decades. Would I have the same interest rate if I were to buy the same farm as he would have, or would he have a lower rate than me?
If you came in off the street and your asset base and repayment history and all that was much less than somebody else's, your rate would be higher, for sure.
Okay.
And I would say if you had a sound business plan that would work, it wouldn't be, it's not going to be astronomically higher. It's not venture capital rates or anything like that. But proven producers, stability in business do have an advantage in terms of rates, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could debate that all day. I would argue that if somebody walks in to buy a farm for the first time and has a great record of repaying their own, say, residential mortgage,
yes,
and has maintained that and kept it in good order, to promote young farmers, you would almost think their rate would be lower than somebody with an existing rate if you're in fact trying to help young farmers, but I'll leave it at that for now. Mr. Aziz, I thought that was a great presentation, a great product that you're offering. Certainly in Canada, we have the best run of the big rails, and we have the worst run of the big 6 railways. Okay, if you were going to talk with Mr. Ackman from Pershing Square, that now has a 12% stake in CP Rail what kind of a competitive advantage would a railway like CP have using your new design rail cars? What would that add to their efficiency as a corporation?
Well, first of all, it would be inappropriate for me to comment on a particular railroad.
A specific finding.
But the efficiencies that we've outlined are basically available to anyone who wants to buy it. The key factor here, and what we tried to illustrate, was we made a specific case to the existing grain car fleet that is in operation now, because that fleet and all of its capacities and such are known. When you go and take this car and put it against a railroad, which has a very diverse number of cars, all of differing capacities and such, you come to a conclusion that is very nebulous for discussion purposes. One of the key factors to the merits of the system that we're proposing is that we're proposing that this be run basically in unit trains. In other words, and we've all seen these out west, where you don't have a mixed freight train. You have a unit train that is composed of 150 to 200 grain cars that are all taking grain either to the Port of Vancouver or up to Prince George or wherever, or to Fort William, Thunder Bay, to the elevators there. So the biggest impact that this makes is in unit train service, and that's why it's important that our proposal, as we proffered it, be done in the way that we've illustrated this afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Z. To the Canadian bankers and to Farm Credit, thanks very much for your presentations on the financial side. Very good to have you here again. And Mr. Z, I just wanted to say I was very impressed with your presentation as well. Very interesting concept, and that's going to, I think, hear more on it. There was a lot of good questions on it. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, and all of you, thank you again for being here today. We appreciate it, and Merry Christmas to all of you. We're going to break for just 30 seconds, and so if I could ask the witnesses to leave the table as soon as possible, and we'll be bringing the next round. So thanks again. resume our meeting here, and thanks very much, Minister, for being here today, Mr. Nubley, Mr. DuPont. And just before we get started, Mr. Minister, just wanted to recognize a young fellow from my riding, Chad Richards, going to Carleton University, but he goes to, I know it's shameless, but Chad is sitting in on his very first committee meeting. He comes from a very rural town, in fact, the heart of beef country, and comes from a small high school with the only agricultural curriculum in my riding. So welcome, Chad, and with that, Mr. Minister, we'll turn it over to you.
We just hang around with you, Mr. Chair, and you can learn by osmosis. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's certainly a pleasure to be here today. I want to thank this committee for your continued hard work to move the agricultural sector forward, particularly around growing forward to and building competitiveness in the sector. Like you, our government knows that agriculture plays a vital role in the Canadian economy. We're working hard with industry to help it grow and compete and to move any barriers to competition out of the way. We're seeing a lot of farm industries firing on all cylinders right now with higher prices and incomes, strong demand, and a more positive forecast for the future. We're seeing very good results so far in 2011 with farm market receipts up almost 11%, January to September, thanks to double-digit gains in prices for grains, oilseeds, cattle, and hogs. Clearly, our farmers are making more money from the marketplace, and that's great news. Even better news, farmers are keeping more of those dollars, with record profits last year, the highest in 2 decades. And of course, by lowering our corporate tax rates another 1.5%, agriculture from the farm gate up is well served. At the same time, we continue to support Canadian farm families during times of need. That's reflected in the supplementary estimates you have in front of you here this afternoon, I guess, not evening yet. You'll notice that these estimates appropriately reflect the challenges that have been dealt to Canadian farmers. The majority of these estimates are emergency assistance to producers affected by flooding in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Quebec. At the same time, our government is also investing more to protect consumers and preserve the excellent reputation of Canada's food industry, both here at home and around the world. As a result of our commitment to continuous improvement in food safety and under the great stewardship of President George DuPont, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency has received the resources necessary to hire a large number of additional inspectors. Over the past 5 years, the CFIA's inspection staff has increased by 733 people. The agency has launched a national recruitment strategy that will provide an ongoing pool of qualified inspectors for years to come. That's why, in the 2011 budget, $100 million over a 5-year period were committed to the agency to support the work of these inspectors. We're also reducing the red tape burden to help our farmers compete and make their money from the marketplace. As you know, money is made filling out orders, not government forms. In response to a motion from the member for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex, to help Canadian farmers get access to agricultural inputs that are available to producers in other countries, we have worked to streamline regulations. Most of these are under the jurisdiction of the PMRA, under Health Canada, as you well know, but fertilizers fall under CFIA, and George and his team have worked tirelessly to ease that backlog. We've caught right up and we're moving forward, so that's good news. Farmers and agribusinesses now enjoy a regulatory approval process where foreign research and approvals are being leveraged to a much greater extent to speed up approvals for products here in Canada. We have sent a clear message to the industry that we hear them and we support them. We will continue to work hard to create conditions that support farmers' calls for a more competitive and leveled playing field. We're maintaining the confidence that both Canadians and our trading partners have in the high quality and safety of Canada's food. Our government knows that trade is crucial to our farm gate, given that between 50% and 80% of most commodities are exported. That's why we've worked with industry to open, reopen, and expand markets in every corner of the world. Our government's Market Access Secretariat has been a strong driver of success. Working with industry, we've returned home with some real tangible results for our farmers, producers, and processors. And the results show. Last year, our agriculture and seafood exports topped $39 billion, our second highest in history, putting us in the top 5 agricultural exporters in the world. The Secretariat recently released a report highlighting our achievements in 10 key market areas in the first year. Among them, Russia, where our beef exports more than tripled by value; China, where we negotiated transitional measures for canola seed exports, which enabled farmers to maintain almost $2 billion in canola exports to that vital market; and the United States, where we have significantly extended
and expanded opportunities for Canadian canola exports for biodiesel production in the U.S., a market the Canadian canola industry estimates is worth up to $450 million a year. Everywhere we go, we're finding new customers who want to buy Canadian. Free and open trade creates jobs, deepens prosperity, and makes our country more competitive in the global marketplace. Our government understands this. That's why we've concluded free trade agreements with 9 countries in less than 6 years, why we're in negotiations with many more, including the European Union and India, 2 of the largest markets of the world, all the while protecting supply management. As the Prime Minister said in the House the other day, and I quote, "It's always our intention when we go to the table to make sure we protect and promote the interests of all Canadian sectors, including supply management." Supply management, as you know, is a system that works and is wanted by our industry. 2 weeks ago, we tabled legislation to implement Canada's free trade agreements with Panama and Jordan, 2 markets which are becoming very important to Canadians. We continue to work hard to level the playing field for our farmers. A couple of weeks ago, the WTO found in favour of Canada's claim of discrimination because of the U.S. mandatory country of origin labelling, or COOL. This is a great achievement for our livestock industry, and we'll be working with our American allies to create a stronger, more profitable livestock industry on both sides of the 49th parallel. We're also working to level the playing field here at home through the Marketing Freedom for Grain Farmers Act. This legislation will give Western Canadian grain farmers long overdue equity with farmers here in Ontario and other parts of this great country. We continue to work with industry and the Canadian Wheat Board to ensure maximum clarity and predictability for producers and the rest of the trade through the transition to an open market. We have struck a working group to look at crop logistics issues, and we are already seeing some exciting new developments in value-added investments in Western Canada. Marketing Freedom will drive innovation across the prairies in value-added processing and exciting new niche market opportunities. Our government knows that innovation drives competitiveness. That's why in our most recent budget we committed $50 million to foster new growth for agriculture and new growth for the Canadian economy. The new Agricultural Innovation Program is designed to accelerate the pace of innovation and help innovate products and technologies get off the drawing board and into the market. It will improve the productivity and competitiveness of the Canadian agricultural sector and help capture opportunities in domestic and global markets. I'm proud of our government's ongoing support for innovation in agriculture. Innovation will be a vital tool for our farmers and processors to meet growing global demand. It's mind-boggling to think that the world's population is expected to reach 7.6 billion by 2020, up from 7 billion today. That's an extra 68 million people to feed each year, and that represents exciting opportunities and challenges for our agricultural sector. If our producers and processors are going to continue feeding the world, they're going to require the right tools. For the past 3 years, the Growing Forward framework has been delivering flexible, proactive programming that's helping farmers tackle real issues in the agricultural sector. As you know, the current Growing Forward agreement ends on March 31st of 2013. We will continue to meet with industry and provincial territorial governments to shape a new agricultural framework for the future that will help us move to a more modern, innovative, competitive, and sustainable sector that will define our success over the coming years. Federal, provincial, territorial ministers endorsed the direction of the next framework at their annual meeting last July in St. Andrews, New Brunswick. Ministers agreed that the next policy framework must help the agricultural industry capitalize on emerging market opportunities, supported by world-class research and development, a new generation of farmers, and an efficient regulatory system. I expect that the next policy framework will be a modern, coherent, integrated approach for a progressive sector confronting the challenges of a fast-paced, competitive global economy. 2 rounds of discussions with industry are complete. A 3rd round, focusing on program design, is planned for the new year. Of course, the great work happening at this table will be invaluable input as we shape this new framework for success for our farmers and processors. Mr. Chair, like you and the members of this dynamic committee, I'm optimistic about the prospects for Canadian agricultural sector. And I know that everyone around this table, regardless of political stripe, wants to see it grow and prosper. I look forward to continue to work with you over the coming years to grow new opportunities for our farmers and our food processors. I welcome any questions you may have, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And there's no presentation from Mr. Nubley or Mr. DeVant? No. Okay. Just a reminder to our committee members that when it comes to public servants, particular attention is paid to the questioning of public servants. Obligation of a witness to answer all questions put by the committee must be balanced. against the role that public servants play in providing confidential advice to their ministers, and the role of the public servant traditionally been viewed in relation to the implementation and administration of government policy rather than the determination of what that policy should be. Consequently, public servants have been excused from commenting on the policy decisions made by the government, and I know that all of you always respect that. So with that, we'll turn it over to Mr. Allen for 5 minutes, and I understand you're splitting with Mr. Rousseau.
That's correct, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. And let me just convey our apologies about the late notice, but we really appreciate you taking the opportunity as quick as you did to respond to our request. That's greatly appreciated. But let me talk just a little bit about what you have termed as free and open trade, that is your government's position, versus what some of our competitors might actually look at, and you used the latest C-18 bill, the Canadian Wheat Board, as being that open market piece, versus what our trade competitors and future trade partners talk about as a closed market, and that being supply management. Clearly, we've entered into a new realm with the EU, which we're in negotiations with, and looks like at least the Pacific folks as well, when it comes, which includes New Zealand. So when we see the juxtaposition of an open market for wheat, as you've described it, and a closed market and supply management as our foreign folks see it, that we actually want to have an agreement with, how do we square the circle with them in lieu of the fact that the minister said in the House that supply management goes on the table as everything does, and then they work backwards to take it off? And one last caveat before I let you, comment on this. The Minister of International Trade today said, in reply to a question from the opposition about grain, he said, what do you want us to do with it? Make bread here? We'll export it, which really suggests to me that the Minister of International Trade is talking about an export market for a raw product, but the Minister of Agriculture, rightly so, I think, and commendably so, is talking about value add. So how do we square those circles, Minister?
Well, I think quite easily, Mr. Allen, we've been able to have a very aggressive free trade policy in this government and still be able to backstop the industries that work well domestically. As you wrongly point out, supply management is not a closed shop. Roughly 5% a year of our domestic consumption is allowed in from other countries. That means on an annual basis some $150 million from the EU comes into Canada. We have $30 million of access back. In the case of New Zealand, I think the last 4 years was in the neighborhood of between $80 and $100 million on average, and we have zero back to New Zealand. So it's not a closed shop as such. The Canadian Wheat Board was a mandatory system only in Western Canada. The supply managed system, of course, is embraced coast to coast to coast in all provinces and territories, and is well liked by the farmers that it serves, and they serve it. Having said that, I don't see any problem continuing on with the aggressive trade agenda that we have, protecting supply management, yet talking about market access and other issues. Every country in the world have defensive and offensive positions. In the case of the TPP, the United States is very vocal and very open about maintaining their support for sugar and cotton and some dairy. The Japanese are very cognizant of the fact that they will not move on rice protection. So certainly we're not alone in having defensive positions as well as offensive positions. The last part of your question was?
The Minister of International Trade is actually the person responsible for the trade deal.
Talking about bread and well, we do a combination of both. Certainly the domestic market is well served by the top quality Canadian wheats and corns and so on that go into the baking system. Having said that, we still export on average between 50 and 80% of those commodities. So he's right in both ways. You're picking only one part of the equation. Certainly we'll make bread with it at home, but we cannot use up everything we produce and have the ability to produce more. Canada, very fortunately, is one of the very few countries in the world that has the ability and the technology to step up and produce for a growing global demand, and we're happy to do that. But it's going to take biotechnology. It's going to take the tremendous work ethic of the Canadian farmer and processors that are willing to step up and continue to do their job as well.
Okay. Monsieur le Ministre, merci de votre présence.
Thank you for being here today, Mr. Ritz. Yesterday, I participated in the UPA meeting, from Quebec, and Mr. Paradis spoke to the attendance at the meeting. He talked about the government's intent to concentrate on innovation and marketing, as well as its commitment to support the supply management system that is characteristic of Quebec farming. You are in favor, of course, of supporting supply management. We see that. But what happened with the Canadian Wheat Board means that there is going to be a major shift in the way in which wheat is marketed. That is of concern to the UPA. That's created confusion and some fear amongst our producers. How can we be sure that your government won't decide to change the way that our farm products will be marketed, just like what was done in the West?
Mr. Rousseau, that we work with industry. We work with provinces and territories. We have a very good working relationship across the country and with all sectors of the industry. I've made myself available as often as I can and as quickly as I can in instances like this and as instances meeting with Supply Managed or the UPA. I understand there may be some leadership changes there from Christian Lacasse, who's done an excellent job representing Quebec farmers. I understand Marcel Groslo may be the next president, a tremendous gentleman as well. He's serving me well on some advisory boards at this point. There is no fear that we will arbitrarily change things. We've never done that. Even in the case of the Wheat Board, we had the support of the 3 of the 4 provinces involved in that. We had the support of all of the major livestock, grain producers, and so on in that Wheat Board area, with the exception of the NFU. So we don't operate arbitrarily. We sit down and work our way through and chat to make sure that we're on the right track. And we did that with the Wheat Board. And we can constantly meet with the UPA and with, as you said, my good friend, Minister Paradis, was there to meet with them. He'll report back to me on what he heard and so on very soon. But at the end of the day, we are the party that had support for our supply management in our campaign platform. We are the party that brought it up in the throne speech, and we continue to support them in every way we can because they help drive the Canadian economy. They do a tremendous job.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zimmer, 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Minister, for coming. I'll actually be sharing my time with Mr. Payne as well. Just got news, actually. We had good news Monday that with our legislation, but we just heard that C-18 has just passed second reading in the Senate. So it's absolutely great news for us that support that. But I wanted you just to give us, we've heard a lot of myths, I guess, to deal with the CWB and a lot of stuff, a lot of rhetoric in the papers and with the opposition parties. But can you clarify what actually is occurring with regard to the Wheat Board? Are we, destroying the Wheat Board, or what is the actual story?
Well, the only thing that will change with the Wheat Board is that the single desk, the monopoly, will be gone. The Canadian Wheat Board will still be there. It'll still be at the same address. And we're hopeful that a lot of the, the really good marketers and analysts and so on that the Wheat Board has developed over the years will stay with the Wheat Board and continue to offer pooling and a brokerage. The Wheat Board now will actually have more tools in its toolbox to offer farmers as well. They can pool any grain. They can broker any grain. They can facilitate. They can do whatever is needed to make sure that they serve farmers the best way forward. They'll have the ability to strike partnerships with any of the industry players, continue to work on contracting with railways. They'll continue to work with producer cars, but as you well know, producer cars are under the Grain Act, guaranteed under the Grain Act, and administered by the Grain Commission. They'll continue to operate in a way that will flow the checkoff. We're making sure that the checkoff stays there for science and research. The checkoff will be done at point of sale. Now, of course, the board will be involved in some of that, making sales. That checkoff will then flow back through Ag Canada during that 5-year transitionary period, up to 5 years. So that we make sure that those WGRF and all the other groups are well funded and still able to move forward. So a lot of the situations will stay the same. The only thing that changes is farmers are no longer forced to deal only with the Canadian Wheat Board. They'll be able to deal with the same multinationals, if they so desire, that they do with their canola and their special crops. They'll be able to deal with other brokers that will pop up, other pooling systems that will pop up. I met with Brad Bannon yesterday of ICE. They'll be up and running very soon into the new year with offering a pool for wheat. They've had one for canola that's very successful. Farmers recognize their expertise. So not a lot will change with the actual Wheat Board, with the exception of the single desk.
Right. And you spoke about it a little bit in your statement just now, but can you explain too, maybe a bit more length, I guess, some of the tools that the CWB is going to have. We're actually expanding their toolbox versus cutting it off. So if you can explain in a little bit more detail what we're doing there.
Well, as I said, other than the single desk, they'll now have access to other grains should they desire to keep using the Port of Churchill. We've also put in place an incentive of $5 million a year, but it will incent more than just the old wheat board grains. So any pooling that wants to be done and farmers holding their grain to make use of that Churchill port, the wheat board can actually take part in more grains than just wheat, durum, and barley, which is good news for them as well. There's a number of changes that are coming, working with industry. Of course, the wheat board is a valued partner on our crop logistics board that is co-chaired by my Deputy Minister John Lovely and Gordon Bacon, the Special Crops Group from Canada. And the wheat board is a vital player on that as well. That'll streamline how we handle and move our products from the farm gate right through to port.
Right. Good. Thank you.
You have about a minute and a half, Mr. Payne.
Well, thank you for the last minute and a half, Chair, and thank you for coming, Minister. We heard, Mr. Minister, a couple of weeks ago on the World Trade Organization that the term the U.S. country of origin labeling certainly discriminates against foreign markets, and in particular us in Canada. Could you maybe update this committee on why the decision is good news and what that means for Canadian families and workers in the livestock industry? Thank you.
Well, of course, this is the next step in the process. I fully expect the Americans will appeal. They have a history of doing that. Having said that, we're a long ways down the road to completing, getting back to normalcy across both directions in that 49th parallel. As you well know, the country of origin labeling put our livestock sector predominantly into a tailspin in that American producers and processors that were buying feeder cattle or weanling hogs weren't sure if they should or could simply because they had to be held separately all the way through the system, labeled separately and so on to go on the store shelves. We never saw it get to that extent, but it was always that hammer hanging over our head. There's always been a differential in price between Canadian and American stock. This just spread that differential to the point with our dollar climbing actually exacerbated the problem. But it's good news for our livestock sector. We've got tremendous allies in the livestock sector and processors on the U.S. side as well. But I fully expect them to appeal it, which means our day of celebration will be held in abeyance for 6 or 8 months.
Okay, thank you. I'll move to Mr. Valeriot for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, for coming in today, and I can assure you there'll be a day when I'll be able to share my time with somebody again. I have two questions of you, and if there's time for a third...
On that.
I have two questions of you, and if there's time...
You can actually do that now, Frank. You can just toss it across the table.
I hope my time's not being used right now. Jerry, you know these names. You know Dave Smarden from BioEnterprise. You know Gord Surgener. You know their efforts to commercialize all this wonderful innovation that's out there. And I'd put to you this, that and I don't see it in the estimates, that while we have some wonderful innovation, and you know where it's going on, and it's going on in Guelph and other communities, I'm wondering why we're not, and I wrote you a letter on this, I'm anxious to get your response, why we're not putting more effort into putting the minds and the money together, supporting it with some government money so it can be leveraged, and really keep our innovation from heading south. There's so much good stuff going on, and I'm asking you to do that, and if it's not in the estimates, what will you do? My second question you may find a little more offensive, and it is about the wheat board and the $200 million cap. I mean, there are a lot of people, including Stephen Vandervalk, who are plenty angry about this. It's from our perspective, and you can deny it, but from our perspective, it's being used to fund the eventual liabilities of transitioning the wheat board. And I see nothing in the estimates at all for that transition that will probably start as soon as this legislation goes through. And I understand it went through second reading now at the Senate, and it's likely to be law before Christmas. So that transition is going to start right away. What is what's going to be the cost for that? That's not showing up in your estimates, and that the $200 million that you've raised the cap by isn't going to cover.
Starting with the monies for commercialization of good ideas. Absolutely, we agree with you. There's some tremendous opportunities to do that. It is, historically, it is money at risk. You know, a lot of people back away from it because there's always a larger risk factor. That's why in last spring's budget, we committed to another $50 million to do exactly what you're talking about.
Innovation.
Yeah, well, no,
That's
but I mean
not commercialization.
Well, no, but I mean under that cap, you have to have a name on certain things. But certainly, we have the ability within that name, the Innovation Fund, to take good ideas to commercialization. We can do it within that. So we'll look at every aspect, every case-by-case situation, and assess it on which is the best road forward. And you know, if it looks like a really good idea, we'll be there. And then help them leverage other groups that are around there. You need someone to quarterback, as you often know. There's good ideas all across the country, and some are done in silos, and they don't know. Researchers are great at research, but as soon as they found what they were looking for, it goes over there. Right. Now that piece needs to be put with that piece from BC, exactly. And then that gets, and that's what we're hoping to do and striving to do with all of this from an agricultural perspective with that $50 million in budget 2011. We've had similar programs, DIAP and others, that sought to do those things that were very, very successful. And very often it doesn't take a lot of money to move things to the next step and push them on beyond. So we're looking forward to getting that in play. As you know, that budget bill passed a short time ago. So now we'll be working out the program spending on that. Some $11 million will go out this year, this fiscal year, and then the next will come out in year 2. It's a 2-year program. On the $200 million cap, that's a number. It's a cap. I can assure you there isn't that kind of money in that account. That account is sitting in Winnipeg at the Canadian Wheat Board. It's not my money. It's not farmers' money. It's money that is in the contingency funds have always been held separately from the pools. The contingency monies have always been made up from profits the Wheat Board has generated on hedging, on contracts, on even making money on money. You know, and all the different things that they do it from their business standpoint, and then it's used to promote the business of the Canadian Wheat Board within the Canadian Wheat Board. You know, they've developed some lab settings and different things like that out of those fundings. The board approached us last spring, just before the election, to say raise the cap to $100 million. We looked at what they were proposing to do with it. We said yes, but it took until this fall to get it done with the election in the way and so on. But it was already in play, but we just had to go through the legalities of Treasury Board and so on. When
you raised it to 2.
Yes. At the direction of people in the industry and so on, looking at what was happening with monies out of the pools. There was going to be another bit of monies coming at the year-end books, and on that direction we decided to raise the cap to capture that. I can assure you it's nowhere near 200, but as you know the process, it's easier to pick another number than to do it in $10 million increments. Having said that, that money will be used after discussions with industry, with the board, and us as the government backstopping a lot of this to make sure that it is used in the best interest of Western Canadian farmers. We as a government have pledged and have said we will be there for the extraordinary costs. The severance packages, any changes to pension, those types of things, we'll be there. Backstopping the new board for up to 5 years will mitigate a lot of the liabilities that we saw in the accounting firm that the board had hired in contracts and storage and all those things. But a lot of that will be mitigated in taking it out to that 5-year. That's why we set up to 5 years, to mitigate those liabilities.
Thank you. Now move to Mr. Holback for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for taking the time out at short notice to be here. You know, it's you've always been great when we've asked you to come before committee. Your time has been, I know, very valuable. You've made time for us, and we really appreciate you doing it.
We enjoyed it. So.
You understand how the committee works. There's no question about that. Minister, we've been talking about in our study on the BRM programs and looking forward at our Growing Forward 2 program. I was wondering maybe if you could just give us an overview on how you see those negotiations with the provinces going forward. Do you see, like, it's an interesting environment that we're actually working in, especially in the grains and oilseed sector, where when we did the last set of Growing Forward programs, they were under severe financial pressures to get cash out fairly quick. Well, now we're in a kind of an envious position where the cash flow, the cash pressures aren't there. But in the same breath, now we need to be more responsible to think forward on what we need for proper programming. So any insight you can offer on that?
Sure. As you well know, the BRM programs and the whole suite of programs are shared between the federal government at 60% and the provinces and territories at 40%. So we work together. As we're developing the new programs, we include industry as well to say, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what do you see changing? As you well know, Mr. Hoback, agriculture has changed drastically in the last decade, in the last 5 years, and it's doing that as we roll forward. So we want to make sure that we're capturing the potential of change as well. The provinces and territories are always asking for more flexibility. We understand that. The vast majority of the programs are now delivered at the provincial or territorial level. Right now, it's only Manitoba and the Atlantic region that are delivered by a federal government entity. Other than that, the other provinces have taken up the challenge to deliver their own, and we'll certainly talk with and entertain, if Manitoba should want to take over their own as well, to try and shorten that time lag, make sure that farmers have the bankability, predictability, and timeliness that they require. Our time on delivering the programs is getting better. The forms to fill out to come in are getting smaller, and farmers are getting better at doing that. Having said that, the best backstop is a good, solid market, and we've been fortunate in the last little while to have that, with the exception of the flooded areas and some crop insurance issues and so on like that. The programs have responded well. They are demand-based programs. Agri-Recovery is line itemed at $125 million. Last year, we're in the $450 million range. So it's a demand-based program. So don't let that scare you when you see the number bigger or when you see the number smaller. It means it wasn't demanded that year. And we'll see those fluctuations on a year-by-year basis. We are working towards less reactive and more proactive in the next round of programming discussions. We've had 2 rounds with industry and multiple rounds with the provinces and territories working through. I've been meeting with some of my provincial colleagues. The ministers from Saskatchewan and Alberta were here the other day, as well as doing a great announcement on C-18. We also talked about the new generation of programs. Yesterday, when I was in Winnipeg, I met Stan Struthers. We spent about an hour talking about the new programs and working our way forward to make sure that we serve farmers in a more fulsome way. It's an interesting exercise. Farmers want to make their money from the marketplace, not the mailbox. We get that. We're not going to send money out just to send money out. We're going to make sure that what we do is strategic. We're going to help commercialize and develop. We need new varieties of wheats. The wheat board's been sitting on a CPS utility wheat, red, that will yield 100 bushels an acre and is as valuable as most of the milling wheats. So those are the types of transitions that we're working towards, making sure that there's a lot more research, innovation, making sure that those types of things have the ability to be commercialized.
One thing that we heard about from one witness in our testimonies, and it's on the research and innovation, so it's a good segue into what he said. He talked about the speed to get the technology from research into the marketplace and what we can do to do that, not only for technology that was developed here in Canada, but technology that's being developed around the world that our farmers would like to adapt and grab and run with it. So have we been talking with the provinces on how we can streamline that process?
Well, we've been talking with the provinces on that process. We've also been talking with some of our trading partners, the U.S., for example, in that North American perimeter and harmonization of a lot of that work. What we're doing now when it comes to new chemicals and pesticides, we're starting with their science as a base, not starting back at zero. And that should help us get new products, environmentally friendly products, onto the marketplace a lot faster than we've seen. That just makes sense. It takes less money and it's a lot more timely. The problem we've always faced is that the Canadian market is seen as a small percentage of their overall sales, and to come in and spend years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the go-ahead for a product that may be out of date by the time you get it there makes no sense at all. So we have to start to work at the speed of commerce, and we're well underway to do that, partnering with PMRA at Health. It's not all mine. As I said, George and his team at CFIA have done a great job on catching up on the fertilizer side. We'll continue to work on that on a case-by-case basis as well.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Now move to Mr. Adamanenko, and I understand you're splitting your time with Ms. Renault.
That's correct. Thanks, Chair. I wouldn't mind if you gave us a 2.5-minute signal or something like that.
Okay.
Thanks, Minister, for being here, and also Mr. Nubley. It's good to see you again, Mr. Dapont. Congratulations on your relatively new position. Nice to see you here. I would just like to, first of all, my first question is the very recent tariff reduction on apple juice concentrate that has happened. I'm wondering what impact, if you've analyzed the impact to our fruit growers on that. That's the first question. The second one is a follow-up to my letter to you, Mr. Dapont, on horse meat of the 7th of November. And there are some concerns of health, of the fact that horses aren't raised for food production. They often have a significant degree of banned medications such as phenylbutazone, which we do not allow in meat for human consumption. There have been studies, such as in the Irish Veterinary Journal, that this can cause it does cause anaplastic anemia in children, and the EU wants now stamps new equine passports issued to horses over the age of 6 months as ineligible for its food supply. We import something like 50,000 horses for slaughter in this country. 85% probably have taken some drugs in their lifetime. So specifically, I'm wondering what percentage of drug testing that we do is performed on equine organs. What is the methodology and specific testing mechanism that we use to ensure that this meat coming out of our horse slaughter plants is safe, it doesn't contain phenylbutazone? Are the equine identity documents that are kept on records, are they kept in records by slaughter plants, and are they being edited by CFIA for accuracy and possible fraud? You know, if you don't have the exact answers here, Mr. Dapont, I certainly wouldn't mind if you threw them in your response to me. So I'll stop there.
Okay. On the apple tariff, Alex, this was done for a processor in Quebec. He had searched Canada, couldn't find enough apples to facilitate the juicing that he was requiring to do. So there's been a lowering of the tariff on apples brought in specifically for that processor. We are in discussions, or have had discussions, I understand, from the trade side. Finance makes the actual final call on that, but there are discussions with industry before that happens as to the quantity and where it's going and so on.
So specifically to that processor?
As I know it, yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay. On the horse meat side, a lot of the problems, I'll call them, or situations that we face in Canada will be rectified very shortly. The Americans have just reinstated the ability to do horse slaughter in the U.S., and that will stop that flow of 50 to 60,000, whatever it was, the number you gave, I don't know what it is. It varies from year to year at that point. Horse slaughter is a valuable operation in this country. Having raised horses, I can tell you there are times that's the only alternative. Rather than a horse mistreated or something, sometimes very often that's the more humane way to do it. It is a legitimate, viable business in this country, predominantly exporting into the European market. I can assure you that very few horses are buted, as you call it. If they come off the racetrack where they've been, you know, their legs, I mean, what it does is basically desensitize them to running. You know, I raise predominantly ranch horses, and you know, I never had it. You know, most ranchers don't use bute, so most of those horses going through are not. PMU operations, where the offspring are sometimes sent to a slaughter facility. You mentioned under 6 months. A lot of that happens if they're not up to a bloodline or something that's saleable. They'll get sent to a slaughter facility, and they're not buted as well. So I think that argument's a little bit overblown, but the regulations are quite strict here in Canada. I'll let George fill that in.
Thank you very much, and I will respond in detail to your letter, but I think the points I would make, as you've already noted, last year we implemented new procedures where horses coming for slaughter have to be certified that they have not had any medications in the previous 6 months. In addition, we do regular testing. On the testing methodologies and some of the other detail, I'll send that in response to your letter.
Thank you.
30 seconds, but I was going to say, Ms. Reynaud, there's going to be another 5-minute round, and I have nobody in there. You want to use the 30 seconds, and I'll pencil you in for the next 5 minutes. After that, okay? Doesn't leave you a lot of time here. If you would prefer, I'll just give you a little extra time on the 5 minutes. Does that sound fair? You'll get up for almost 6 minutes.
All right.
Move to Mr. Lemieux for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for being here on such short notice, Minister. Like I was telling the opposition colleagues just last week, that's the excellent service that they've come to expect from the government. So it's good to have you here. Let me also say, I want to talk a bit about trade. I know you follow the proceedings of this committee, and to the proceedings that you have followed, I'd like to add comments of farmers who really appreciate the extent that you go to open up international borders to our farmers, and the tremendous success you've had, both in the context of free trade agreements, but also just in terms of getting the border open to pork and beef, pulse crops, etc., in other countries. Now, I want to focus in on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. it's engendered a lot of discussion. I think it's very good for farmers, particularly when the U.S. is part of this, because, for example, what I've been explaining is that if we're not at the table and the U.S. is, and that goes through, the U.S. farmers win. Our farmers are then disadvantaged because they're not part of that trade deal, and our farmers lose. So it's important that we're at the table, but of course it's raised concerns regarding supply management. Mr. Allen raised that point as well regarding supply management. He had a few questions on it. And the opposition has been saying that it's on the table, it's going to be negotiated away, it's going to be compromised. What I'd like to ask, Minister, you mentioned in your opening remarks you'd put in place, or you helped put in place 9, I think, other trade agreements with countries. In terms of those, have you ever had to compromise on, or have you ever compromised supply management? And could you comment on the TPP, this table that we're now sitting at in terms of trade negotiations and supply management?
Well, the short answer, Mr. Lemieux, is no, we have not compromised supply management, nor do we ever intend to. We see it as a valuable part of our agricultural system and actually a very valuable asset to Canadian consumers. When you look at some of the problems that have been had in those supply managed goods around the rest of the world, we haven't had that in Canada simply because our supply managed families have had the wherewithal, a good solid bottom line to put in the biosecurity and the food safety right from the farm gate on through. So they've done a tremendous job, and they're leading the world actually with traceability and the ability to have that biosecurity in place through to the processors. We've got a number of major world-class processors moving to Canada to take advantage of our dairy. Danone yogurt in Quebec. There's another one now looking at Ontario doing a test run simply to make use of the quality and consistency of our milk. So we look at that as a real bonus. I know there's a lot of folks, and I laugh at my good friend, or with my good friend Garth White at the Restaurant Association, always complaining about the cost of milk. But at the same time, he doesn't compare a restaurant meal in Canada to a restaurant meal in the U.S. And there's quite a discrepancy there too. So I'll be happy to point that out to the next time I sit down with him. On the TPP, the changes, what drew us in, of course, was more so the change that Japan was interested than the U.S. We already have good open trade with the U.S. called NAFTA, and of course we're WTO partners as well. But with Japan now thinking in terms of the TPP, that's a lot more interesting to us to add countries like that into a free trade group. Certainly we'd work with them bilaterally too should they decide the TPP is not to their liking. They're exploring it, as are we. The aggressiveness that is required to join the TPP has been blunted to a certain extent. As I said to Mr. Allen, the U.S. has got some areas that they're defensive on, so does Japan. And for that matter, Australia, good solid trading partner, but there are times that even they don't honor science and their trade rules. They're still holding our beef out after 2003. So, there's a lot of work to be done all over the world. I would not say that we as a government would not have had the success we do without industry coming along with us. Right. This is a complete team that descends on a country, and we don't leave until we get a good amount of movement on what we're doing. The Market Access Secretariat has been the quarterback for a lot of that, and Fred Gorel and his team have just done a tremendous service. And then you look at the great work done by embassies around the world, David Mulrooney in China, and I could just go on and on with the great work that our embassies do. We now have a CFIA scientist on the ground in Beijing, another one in Moscow, where we've had some problems on certificates and so on. We actually have personnel now dedicated to Ag Canada, to CFIA, right in those major trading spots, and that's helped a lot.
Good.
Just 10 seconds.
Let me just ask one more quick question about supply management. Our government had put in place the Article 28 and also the cheese compositional standards. Can you just comment on feedback you've received?
Special safeguard.
Special safeguard as well. Can you comment on what you've heard from the dairy industry regarding those initiatives?
They're buoyed by that. A lot of political parties, talk the talk, but, we're the only ones that have walked the walk.
Okay, Ms. Reno, 5.5 minutes.
Thank you. I'll be sharing my time with Mr. Russo. Thank you very much, Chairman. You see in the newspapers that the government always says it's in favor of maintaining supply management in the area of poultry and eggs. But at the UPA convention, it was said that there would be a flexible, pragmatic approach adopted with respect to producers. given this supposed flexibility, is the government going to expand supply management to meet the exigencies of free trade?
For trade-off supply management, we see it as a very valuable part of our agricultural sector. As I said, it's very valuable to consumers too, in that they have access to top quality, consistent supply. So we see it as a very valuable additive to our overall agricultural sector.
Merci. Thank you. Yes. Since the beginning of the committee's work, we've heard many witnesses say that Canada is lagging behind in terms of support of producers, in terms of the organic market, in terms of new types of production. Because of immigration. Because of immigration, we have new markets for lamb, for veal, and all different types of market products. So it would seem that there's no budget. Maybe I'm wrong in what I'm reading, but it seems that there is no credit that has been set aside. There isn't a vote that would support the growth of these new markets. Can you explain what your department's strategy is with respect to that?
Federal level, we concentrate on international markets, and each province then has the ability to brand and market their product. Of course, Quebec is globally known for its tremendous maple syrup. And a growing sheep market and so on like that. As you said, there are immigrant communities moving into our large cities that are demanding sheep and goat and so on, and they've certainly stepped up. I was reading one of the newspapers today about the sheep and goat sales at Agri-Food in Regina, Saskatchewan. The top breeding goats were going for $1,000 an animal, which was double what they were last year. It's tremendous. So the industry has the ability to move forward. We as a government have put together marketing campaigns. We've put together science and technology to work with the groups. We call them clusters, where we bring the group, the federal government, provincial government, academia, the industry itself, and then work towards a result that the industry wants. And we've had very good success with that. On organics, it was this government that put in place an organic standard that builds on the great work done in Quebec as well as the rest of the country, sets a standard, and if you exceed that as Quebec has done, that's even better. So you've got that global standard that has been recognized now by our international trading partners, and Quebec is trading organically internationally now.
Thanks. If sometime's left, I'll give it to Alex. Thanks, Mr.
About two and a half minutes.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Gijon. Thanks, Larry. Minister, just on supply management, we appreciate the idea that we're going to protect supply management. However, it can still be protected, but for example, the tariffs could, or the quota could increase. Right now, it's roughly, you mentioned 5%. We allow 5% of our production. Is there a chance that this could, because I know that our trading partners are wanting this to be increased, for example, to 10%, which means we would still maintain supply management, but allow more to come into the country, thereby our farmers would then take a hit. Would you, could you commit now, today, that this quota that currently exists, 5%, and I believe it's 7.5% with NAFTA, would not be changed?
Well, we have no intention of changing it, Alex. Certainly there is the capacity for countries to ship into Canada, paying the tariff and coming in. So that percentage can mushroom depending on demand. And I know at DFATE, who signs what's called the supplemental quotas, they always assess, and we haven't signed one on beef or dairy or anything for years, simply because it hasn't been required. We've been able to step up our production and meet that demand. So that can balloon in and out depending on who's willing to pay the tariff to bring a product in. We've also cleaned up a lot of situations where, chicken fat came in tariff-free, but you'd open a barrel of chicken fat and, gee, there would be like 50 or 100 drumsticks in there. That's not chicken fat. So we've been able to reassess and make sure that people understand that when it's chicken fat, it's only chicken fat. If there's a chunk of chicken in there, we're not going to take it. So we've been able to clean that type of thing up and make sure that, the lines that we have to support supply management are solid and in place. As one of my colleagues said, that we put in place the cheese compositional standards. You can't call it cheese if it doesn't have milk in it. You know, I often say, you look at the label on some of this cheese spread, it's aluminum chlorohydrazine and the stuff you can't even pronounce. Makes your Butte example look like chump change. So we've said you can't call it cheese unless it's got milk in it. And I get in a big problem with my good buddy Don Jarvis all the time when I say that. But, I mean, that's what consumers expect. And consumers are much more discriminating now in Canada and around the world. They want to know what they're getting. They want to make sure that it's good, top-quality Canadian product. And in most cases, they'll pay a little more for it because they know it's good.
So there's no...
So no change on supply management. Okay. Not while I'm here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our last 5 minutes goes to Mr. Storseth and Mr. Law.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I will be splitting my time with Mr. Law, but it's good to see that we're not only saving the best for last, but the best looking for last.
We won't comment on that.
On a serious note, Mr. Chair, Mr. Minister, I do want to thank you on behalf of the people of Westlock St. Paul. I've been getting inundated with letters this week on Bill C-18, marketing freedom for farmers. You know, we're very grateful that the ag recovery money has been there in Western Canada for the last few years, but we'd most certainly rather be marketing and farming the market than what we have been doing. So thank you very much on behalf of the people of Westlock St. Paul. As you know, Minister, I did sit on the special committee that dealt with the Weatherall report and the food safety. I would like to just get an update on whether or not the government has to date kept its promise in hiring 170 new inspectors. And
yes, we have.
And if we have, where are we at in implementing the recommendations from the Weatherall report?
We are well underway, as we did originally. We accepted all the recommendations. We're well underway to put them all into place. Of course, it takes budgets being passed and so on. The $100 million that was allocated in the last budget for CFIA, as well as refocusing $40 million internally, goes to training and IT and all of the supports that's needed for the 733 inspectors we've hired overall, plus this, you know, including this 170 that we required for the ready-to-eat meat products under the Weatherall report. So it takes budgets getting passed to meet some of those standards. As you know, we just passed that last budget a week or 10 days ago, and George and his team are well underway in putting plans together on how to spend that money over the next, that's 5 years. And so we're well underway in doing all of that. There is a final analysis of the report that will be tabled yet this fall, I understand. We're working on the final versions of that.
Thank you. My last question, Minister, is we had the cattle guys in this week in my office. They love what we're doing on trade. They want us to continue to push it, but they always have a question. Why, after we sign these agreements, does it take so long to ratify and get it through Parliament, like the Columbia Free Trade Agreement, if you'd care to answer on that? And then I give my time to Mr. Lobb.
You might want to ask the opposition that question. They could answer that one better than I can. There is a parliamentary process. I mean, we've committed as a government to bring treaties and trade agreements to Parliament. Certainly we face the vagaries of opposition on those. You know, I think there's more than due diligence done on some of these trade deals. They serve industry well. I remember in the Columbia Free Trade Agreement, and I made 2 or 3 trips down there, was well received. The Canadian Wheat Board traveled with me on those trips because it's a large market for them, and even with their icon, the Canadian Wheat Board, wanting this deal, they kept holding it off. So I'm not sure exactly what went on there.
Thank you.
Okay. My first question, Minister, is regarding the APP, the Advanced Payment Program. And certainly we can remember a few years ago when you wisely extended that program, and certainly for beef producers, their repayment date is next year, and pork is 2 years from now. Can you comment on how that's positively impacted both sectors? And hypothetically speaking, if you can, if we cross the bridge again, what help will be out there for those beef and pork producers?
Well, we assess on a month-by-month basis where the industry's at as to what we should do. Historically, those types of announcements are held fairly close to when the need arises, and then we work it through with industry. But we were quite happy to work with the livestock sector, both beef and pork, to extend the APP. The HILRAP program for pork, of course, turns it into a long-term debt as opposed to needing it being paid back sooner rather than later. On the APP side, yes, extensions have been granted at different times depending on what they're facing. There's a lot of different factors that go into that. Basically, it's just a deferral, and as a federal government, we're happy to do that. It is a federal-only program, the APP, and it's been well received within the industry. We understand agriculture at all levels is a cash-intensive business that relies on cash flow, and when they have hiccups in the market or major eruptions like BSE or H1N1 for pork and so on, then governments have the responsibility to be there for those people.
One quick last question. Going forward, we've been doing a review in our committee, and it's really been reassuring how positively it has been received, specifically around science and innovation. Well, the one comment we do get is the paperwork that's required, and as we move into growing forward too, could you just comment on what the opportunities are out there to make that more efficient?
Well, we'll simplify the forms as much as we can. The problem is, and Ontario is probably a little bit different than, say, Saskatchewan, simply because of the diversity of agriculture that you've got. Each farm will have 3 or 4 major operations on it, where in Saskatchewan it's all grain or it's all livestock. There are still some diversified, but nothing like we have in Ontario, and that's, of course, part of your strength. So it's hard to have a simplified form when you've got all that diversity to address, but we'll do our best to make sure we get it down into a workable form that farmers can understand. Today's farmers are very astute. They know what it takes forms to make these things happen, but at the end of the day, we'll keep them as simplified and as easy to do as we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Minister, just one last little thing, and I know you'll be as frustrated as I am on it. Is
probably not.
But just the situation with Korea.
Yep.
And I understand there's some contracts that run out in January, I think in the pork sector with some of our companies. And, now that the U.S. has got theirs, I don't know whether you can comment or not, but I mean, it's something that I know is you worked hard on, and we're not there. But if you could add anything on it.
Well, as a matter of fact, I was able to meet with the Korean ambassador this afternoon, and we'll continue to chat. We had put the WTO challenge on beef access, held it in abeyance last July, working towards the end of this calendar year, as close as we could to that, to regain access for Canadian beef into the Korean market. Their inspectors are on the ground here right now. They've been here almost a week inspecting our slaughter facilities that will export into Korea. It seems to be going extremely well. They've had some major problems over there with signing the American free trade. People are still in the streets, but it's an anti-American thing. It's not about food. Canada is still very, very well respected there, and we're hopeful that we can get back into that market in a fulsome way. When it comes to pork, the American Free Trade Agreement, of course, has our guys looking with envy at that. Certainly, we recognize the fact that over time the tariffs will disappear for Americans, but it doesn't happen immediately. Korea was quite explicit in restocking their pork after a foot-and-mouth disease using Canadian genetics. We've had a tremendous year with Canadian pork going into Korea. We want to maintain that, so we know we have to continue to work with our trading partners in Korea to make that happen, and we're up to the challenge.
Yeah. Well, thanks for all your work on that, and thanks for coming here at short notice.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. We have some, before everybody leaves, we just have some short motions, housekeeping as far as the estimates, so and we'll be very brief. I just have 5 brief motions. First one is, shall vote 1B under Agriculture and Agri-Food carry. It's for an amount of $21,437,422. Moved by Mr. Payne. All in favor? Motion is carried. Shall vote 10B under Agriculture and Agri-Food carry for $24,171,425. Moved by Mr. Storseth. All in favor? Motion is carried. Shall vote 20B under Agriculture and Agri-Food carry, amount $1. I'm not going to explain it. Mr. Zimmer, all in favor? Carried. Shall vote 25B under Agriculture and Agri-Food carry, also for an amount of $1. Moved by Mr. Hoback. All in favor? Carried. Shall the Chair report votes 1B, 10B, 20, and 25B under Agriculture and Agri-Food to the House? Moved by Mr. Valeriot. All in favor? Carried. I will do that on Monday afternoon. Thank you. Have a good weekend.